Welcome to the Starzology Astrology Podcast. I'm your host, Arwynne O'Neill, and today I'm here with my friend Katia, and we're going to be talking about Mercury square Neptune. This is an aspect that is coming up, so this is part of our transit series, and it's also part of our aspect series because, as we always like to do, we talk about the transits, and then we talk about what this aspect is like in your chart, and then we give some celebrity examples. So, hi Katia, thanks for joining me.
Oh, well, thanks so much for having me, Arwynne.
Yeah, so this time we're going to be talking about an aspect that's coming up January 8th, 2024. And Mercury is going to be at 25 degrees Sagittarius, and it will square Neptune at 25 Pisces. So before, we've talked about Mars and Venus aspects, and those are a little bit longer-lived aspects. Now we're going to be talking about a Mercury aspect, which is really only going to be effective like for a couple of days. Mm-hmm. But what's happening is that Neptune, which is obviously a giant, massive planet and really important generationally speaking, it spends about 12 years in each sign. So its movements are massive. And anytime it makes an aspect to a personal planet or like, the sun or Mercury or the moon or Venus or Mars, it's really important. So we're going to talk about how that is going to affect us in a transit and then what it looks like in your chart.
We've never talked about this, but where's Mercury right now?
Oh, yeah. So Mercury is, it's actually obviously the closest planet to the sun. So it's never very far from the sun. It only will ever be in either the same planet, the same sign that the sun is in right now, or it's going to be one before it or one after it. So if you're a Taurus, for example, you could only ever really have Mercury in either Taurus, Aries, or Gemini, because those are on, one sign on either side. Mm. So Mercury is always very, very close to the sun. And right now it is in Sagittarius. And here are some keywords for Mercury in Sagittarius. These are from our trusty Stephen Arroyo's Chart Interpretation Handbook. So he says they communicate openly, truthfully, optimistically, enthusiastically, and tolerantly. They have restless aspirations that propel them towards an ideal. And their thinking and reasoning are guided by long-term goals rather than mundane day-to-day details. They have an interest in teaching, and learning and teaching are very closely related for them. So they're lifelong students and natural teachers. Mm-hmm. And when I think about this placement, I think of my mother, who has Mercury in Sagittarius. They strive to establish connections with others by being direct, truthful, and broad-minded. But coherent thinking can sometimes be blurred by their overgeneralizations, and these are motivated by their idealistic aspirations. So they might not be the most concrete thinkers or the most direct, concise speakers, but their lofty ideals will definitely be clear in the way they communicate.
So it rules communication, rules the mind.
Mercury, yeah, for sure. That's exactly right. So if you have Mercury and Sagittarius in your chart, those will be some characteristics to look out for. But right now we're talking about Mercury making a square to, Neptune making a square to Mercury. And Neptune, of course, is a giant and very influential planet. And when it makes connections with inner planets, which Mercury definitely is, what it tends to do is kind of create this fuzzy, dreamlike, like it lends an air of unreality to them. We talked previously about Neptune and Venus and what that does. And that's the one where it was like this glamour and sort of the fuzzy, Vaseline on the camera lens thing. Mm-hmm. So when Neptune connects with Mercury, especially a square aspect, which is one of the challenging aspects, what it does is it creates kind of a really fuzzy sort of illusion effect, but with our communications, which is not always a great thing. So sometimes this will be, and also, like I should say, Neptune, of course, is in Pisces, and Pisces is, of course, the most Neptunian of all the signs. This is an ideal placement for science fiction, for spirituality, for visionary art, for mystical thinking, for wild hallucinogenic visions that will take you on a journey of mind expansion. But it's not so great for contract negotiations or getting to the point or understanding situations clearly.
So details get lost in the sea of imagination.
100%. Exactly. Yeah. So for a couple of days, if you have contracts to negotiate or if you have, business dealings and you really need everybody to understand exactly how you're feeling or what you're thinking, and you want things to be ironed out and all the details to be, totally crystal clear, definitely maybe avoid doing it on January 8th or a couple days before or after if you can possibly avoid it. Mercury transiting square Neptune can distort your thinking. It can make discussions and communications confusing. It can complicate things because there's just this haze of sort of like unreality around everything. And also Mercury is still going to be retrograde at this time. So that is yet another kind of complicating factor. It just happens to coincidentally be that Mercury is going to be still retrograde for a couple more days in early January. So yeah, the potential for confusion and deception and misunderstandings is definitely huge at that point.
So making arrangements may require extra negotiation, extra compromise. It sounds like there's a lot more communication heavy things.
Yeah, for sure. And it's funny because, I mean, it says in all the books and websites about this that you should avoid being dishonest around this time. Well, you should always avoid being dishonest, but
you're going to get away with it a lot less this time.
Yeah, or you'll get away with it more, and then to everyone's detriment. That's the thing. You might even not even realize that you're misleading someone, but you can kind of find yourself getting carried away or becoming kind of paranoid or delusional, and before you even realize it, you're just spouting nonsense.
Oh, no.
Yeah, it's like a nonlinear thinking can kind of creep in. It can be good or bad because that can lead you to being able to write amazing song lyrics or make, beautiful connections that wouldn't occur to you normally.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it must be great creatively, but
it's amazing
it must
creatively.
Be challenging distinguishing reality from metaphor or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. And bizarre conspiracy theories, strange beliefs can definitely sort of dominate the news at this point. People who can, harness this are, going to definitely get a lot of attention, which is interesting. I mean, they do anyway.
Oh, I see.
but yeah, to look out for anyone who you're talking to who might seem like kind of a bit of a trickster anyway. Take them with a grain of salt at this time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And is this always at the end of the year, or does this just happen to be close to the end of the year?
Right. I mean, at this point, because Mercury is in Sagittarius around the same time that the Sun is, so that would be like late November, early December. Mm-hmm. That is usually that is always when Mercury is in Sagittarius, but it's only going to be square Neptune because right now Neptune is in Pisces. So when Neptune moves into Aries, which is going to be sometime, I think, late next year, I could check that. That's a problem for another day.
I'll circle back to that
exactly.
later.
It's at 25 right now, so it's got another 5 degrees to go. It's probably going to be another maybe year.
And what year are we in now?
Oh yeah, so a Neptune takes 12 years to go through each sign. So right now we're in like a 10th year approximately. Mm-hmm. It moved into Pisces in 2011, and it will be moving into Aries in 2026.
Amazing. And does that mean anything to us?
Oh, it's huge. Yeah, it's one of the generational planets. Ooh. So it's, like Pluto moves approximately every 20 years on average. It's got an elliptical orbit. So it takes between like 12 or 13 years at the very shortest. And that's when it's in Scorpio, which is interesting because it rules Scorpio, but it's just coincidental. And then at the very wide end, it takes about 30 years to go through Taurus. So it's on average, it takes 20 years. So that's the real generational one is Pisces, but Neptune is like 12 years, and that's pretty long. I mean,
it sounds like it.
Yeah, exactly. A lot can change in 12 years.
What does it look like in a chart or in someone's chart?
Yeah. So it's interesting. This is one of those, it's a signature of creativity. And especially for music, it's really interesting how when you look at the celebrities, which we'll talk about in a minute, how many musicians and just, really brilliant songwriters and really creative sort of science fiction oriented people that have this aspect. So it's great for poetry, for science fiction writing, for creative nonfiction. And also it's there are some weird celebrities who you may recognize as conspiracy theorists and potentially liars, very famous. Some of these, I'll leave it up to you to discover which ones I possibly have labeled that way. The master of illusions, that's a phrase that came up when I was doing my research. Mm-hmm. And it's the squares can obviously bring out the negative side as well. So not only do people with this aspect have a lot of creativity, but they can also be involved with fraud scandals and substance abuse, alcohol abuse, the aspect of the master of illusions, but also the master manipulator. Mm. So people with this aspect should try to keep their interactions with people as honest as possible and their communications as direct as possible. Because even though you may think you're being clear, they may not understand you, and misunderstandings can lead to deep insecurities and emotional pain for people with this aspect. And they can be very sensitive to criticism and rejection, unfortunately. I do have an interesting sort of quote, like a little bit of a longer quote here from the Aspects and Personality book, which I love to read from because it's Karen Haymaker Zondag. It's a mouthful of a name. But she's got some wonderful insights here. And it's interesting because I actually have this aspect as well. And I like to think that it gives me some creativity with words and art. But I also do hate to be misunderstood more than almost anything. So I really feel the sort of empathy that she comes at this aspect with in her description. So she says, with the hard aspects, and that would be the square or the opposition, but we're talking about the square today, with the hard aspects between Mercury and Neptune, the danger is that when these people want to learn or to recount facts as objectively as possible, and that's one of the Mercury things, is being objective and communicating, they will quite unconsciously color, undermine, blur, or change those facts, and that's because of the influence of Neptune. And this can harm the truth or make light of the truth. And at worst, they can lead others astray or lead themselves astray. The tension between these aspects shows that something is wrong somewhere. And often these people become very tense in a way that gives a feeling of dissatisfaction, and others' reactions to them can cause them to, in many cases, it can be a good thing because you can always kind of be creative with facts, but at the same time, that's not a great thing if you're trying to communicate clearly. So they become disappointed sometimes over the uncertainty of communications. And in the past, when it was easier to kind of go off the grid, this was often an aspect that was seen in hermits or people who would join monasteries or just go off in a life of solitude, because communicating with people just became too frustrating or too sort of fraught with emotional baggage. And it says there's nothing wrong inherently with their impressions or feelings, but they're most likely to go astray in their interpretation of the facts. And one important thing to bear in mind is that when they try to say something, others will sometimes not catch what they mean, and they'll just be misunderstood even when they think they're communicating clearly. Mm-hmm. It's also a very creative and wonderful aspect, but of course, with the square, we're going to see more negative aspects that come up. And it says they are sometimes unable to distinguish between appearance and reality, and that can mean that their fruitful ideas be sort of tinged with this sense of unreality sometimes.
Oh, I see. So blurred boundaries clash with Mercury's clarity. That's not a good recipe. Unfortunately, whether you mean it or not.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's interesting. You really see with the celebrity examples. Get to the celebrity examples here.
Do it.
Do it. Exactly. So the first three that come up, which is hilarious, are Donald Trump, Mel Gibson, and Amber Heard.
One of those already came to mind earlier.
Exactly. I'm not sure which one, but yeah, I mean. And okay, let's focus on the positive here. Uh-huh. There's also Amy Winehouse, which, that's sort of a double-edged sword because clearly she, the way she passed away was a very Neptunian kind of young and substances and alcohol and all that stuff. But creativity and amazing songwriting that is sort of eternal. Mm-hmm. David Bowie, just like doing it right.
Yes.
Completely. Bob Dylan, Jim Morrison, Miles Davis, Shania Twain, Erykah Badu, Sheryl Crow, Jim Carrey, and one of my favorite examples of all is Christopher Nolan, the visionary director of films such as Memento, Inception, Interstellar, Tenet, and the recently Oscar-winning Dunkirk. So he has this mind-bending metaphysical style. He often focuses on science fiction, and he's able to bring these absolutely hallucinogenic, crazy realities into a way that you can actually believe that you're seeing something real on screen. Interstellar was probably one of my favorite science fiction movies, and Memento is like absolutely in my top 10 of all time.
Yes, yeah.
So doing it right.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So those are our celebrity examples. Right now, though, let's go back to talking about Sagittarius and Pisces, because this is a really interesting relationship between these two signs. They're mutable signs, and anytime we have a square, we're going to be talking about one of the modalities. So any planets that are square are going to be either mutable or fixed or cardinal or whatever. They're going to be in the same mode. So this is a mutable square. It's more compounding of that flexibility of thought, because it's not fixed, it's not cardinal. Mm-hmm. So there's this this flexibility that comes with Neptune already and Pisces, and the mutability of both of those signs is just all the more sort of watery and flowing and kind of unreality. So we're really seeing a lot of these themes kind of get compounded with this aspect.
And where does Sagittarius fit into this? Because as far as I know, it seeks exploration of broad topics and more it's like philosophical, spiritual, that base.
Totally.
How does that relate to this?
Yeah, I mean, I think that makes it a little bit easier maybe.
Oh,
because I mean, or harder, depending.
I mean, there it is.
It really depends on the intention of your, and this is, of course, like don't be dishonest. All these advice, things, but it's like if you're already thinking in a visionary and sort of mind expanding and all inclusive kind of global way, like maybe being a little bit influenced by Neptune and having this kind of like visionary, almost spiritual aspect to it is actually going to bring about thoughts that wouldn't occur if you were just kind of going in a more linear fashion. Like if you were just trying to sort of push through, let's say, in a more Capricorn fashion, which is the sign, of course, that follows Sagittarius, you're not going to get a lot of visionary, like amazing, insightful sort of spiritual insights with the Capricorn mindset. So maybe Sagittarius is influenced by Pisces in a positive way. That sure there could be the dissolution and the illusion and all of that weird murky stuff, but at the same time, maybe you don't have these beautiful sort of spiritual borderline hallucinogenic influences without some kind of sacrifice of the facts.
Something to anchor it down.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like maybe there's always a bit of there's a bit of room for that in the world, because otherwise it's just all Virgo thinking all the time, which is, as a Virgo, I that would be terrible. I wouldn't want a world that was all the way I think. I'm glad that there are
diversity.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
And people who are more imaginative and your Christopher Nolan types and your David Bowie types. Because
good time for fascinating conversations.
Yeah.
Probably excellent for brainstorming, but it seems like to channel it in a positive way, that would be more of writing, singing, creating fantasy artwork.
Totally.
It just seems like it can be mind-bending and or like that's the heart of this sign, I guess,
totally.
Or
this aspect.
This
aspect. For sure.
And that's really cool because so much beauty came out of that. For all of us to enjoy.
Absolutely. Yeah. And just if you can, put off like signing that contract or negotiating that deal or going through your taxes, if you can put that off for another couple of weeks.
Yeah. After January 8th, that's where you can like sign those deals.
I would say after Mercury then gets out of its shadow phase. So mid-January.
Okay. Yeah. And how does it feel on a personal level? Like, does it feel like, say, we're not talking communication like with another human being. Yeah. How would it feel to me? Like, how would I feel it? Or does that complicate things based on all of my
actually that is interesting because it always does depend on what your actual chart is. Like if you have Mercury in Sagittarius, like my mother, for example, you are probably going to notice this more because you are going to have Neptune square your Mercury. It's not just Mercury out there in the world, right? But since you, as a Taurus, I think you have Mercury in either Gemini or Taurus, and both of those are not going to be affected like as strongly by this. So they're gonna you'll probably notice some stuff in the world, but I wouldn't say that you'll feel as strongly as if it was touching something in your chart directly. Yeah,
interesting. I wonder. I guess I'm just thinking like I'm taking a course during that time, and there is test component to it, and there are times when I would read something and I'm like, okay, I just read it. There's nothing that really comes out of it. But I could read the exact same thing at a different time. And suddenly something would be much more highlighted. Yeah. And perhaps it's just more relevant to the current state I'm in. Oh, yeah. But I wonder if I start to perceive things differently during those different times.
Absolutely, yeah. And that's really interesting, too, because these things it's almost like this huge clockwork. If you think about the Antikythera mechanism, that Greek artifact that they found that was we've talked about this in the past, but it was able to map all of the different planets and all these different cycles. And it's just this massive connection of gears upon gears upon gears. I think they had it was 30 some odd little different pieces that were layered on top of each other that were in this incredibly genius way, like mimicking the movements of different planets and different cycles and seasons and all this stuff. And if you think about that is going on at all times in the solar system around us, like, and those things are somehow having this weird synergistic effect, synchronous aspect, to our human functioning, that all of those things do sort of change the way we perceive things. And maybe if you were reading something that was a very sort of, interesting, inspiring, visionary kind of passage of some text or some piece of poetry or song lyrics, it would affect you differently on a different day. And one day it's just going to pop and be like, oh my God, wow, this is the most profound thing. And on another day you could read it and be like, I don't get it. It's too esoteric. It's not touching me.
Oh, I see. Yeah. I don't know if this will affect me during this time in particular, but I guess I should be a little cautious not to get too wrapped up in what's like valid teachings versus what's, like
maybe it's a time to like be inspired by things instead of being convinced.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. There we go.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Awesome. Well, there's the takeaway. In being inspired versus convinced. That's what we'll focus on for the couple of days around January 8th.
Yeah, I like that. You're playing up the strengths and minimizing.
Hey, I do have Mercury squared Neptune in my chart. So, and of course, mine is like Mercury and Virgo squared to, Neptune and Sagittarius, which is a completely different, but also mutable. Yeah. So, interestingly. Yeah. So it's got a bit of an echo of what's going on today, but different generation, obviously. Oh. Well, that was a fun one. We should talk about Mercury again next time it makes a major aspect. We'll talk about Neptune maybe in Saturn or something. Saturn is like sort of the opposite of Neptune. So next time...
I'll wear all my rings.
Yeah, exactly. Good one.
I love me a good theme.
Oh, yeah. Saturn. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Arwynne. This is so fun.
Absolutely. We'll see you next time.
Take care.
Bye.
Thanks so much for getting this far through the episode. I just want to take a moment to tell you about the two main options of my astrology services. So the first one is coaching. If you are an aspiring astrologer, and by that I mean someone who's perhaps a hobbyist astrologer or someone who's learning astrology or a student, or you've got a few books and you've been doing it for a while, but perhaps you need a little bit of help to bring it all together, then maybe getting some astrological coaching from me would be the answer for you. The astrology coaching I offer is a 1-hour session on Zoom, and it's tailored to answer your particular questions. For example, if you have issues with natal chart readings, we can go there. Or if you're having problems working with your forecasting, we can go there. Or even basic astrology stuff, or even getting yourself organized for your astrology business. The idea is that astrological coaching will answer your particular questions. It's tailored specifically to you and where you are in your astrological journey. And I'm happy to help you out with some guidance about how you can get going, what to focus on, and what to dismiss. So that would be the astrological coaching for people trying to learn astrology. The second astrological service I offer is consultations. So this is for someone who perhaps doesn't know anything about astrology, but they just want to have their chart read or get their chart done. Call it what you will. So once more, this is a 1-hour consultation over Zoom. I will interpret your chart, tell you about the main features, tell you about where the energy is flowing, and all the rest of what is entailed in a thorough natal chart interpretation. I can also add in some forecasting in there too, bearing in mind we only have 1 hour. So just in summary, I've got coaching for people who want to learn astrology, and I've got consultations for those who want to get an astrology reading done. I'm Alison Price from Starzology.com. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next time.